Riko goes on in her first solo trip into the abyss. Traveling close to her friend Nat, since their assigned areas are next to each other, she notices it's strangely quiet since the usual bird monsters aren't around, and gets distracted by picking up a bunch of artifacts, even accidentally digging up a skeleton. When her bag gets too heavy, she calls out to Nat, but she doesn't hear back from him, so she decides to check. She finds him passed out with a dangerous creature called a crimson splitjaw, about to attack him, and hurriedly tries to help, but gets hit and thrown by the monster. Right before it can finish her off, a bright flash of light suddenly attacks the splitjaw, and it falls away into the abyss. Riko tries to look for where the light came from and finds a glowing blue pendant, so she puts it on. She notices an unconscious boy, but realizes he's not fully human, so she and Nat carry him back to the city of Orth and sneak him into their orphanage with help from the other kids there. That night, they wake him up using a homemade electric shock. He wakes up with no memory of who he is. Riko starts calling him Robot Boy while they try to hide him from their instructor, Jiruo. But after they almost get caught, Riko and the boy sneak out of the orphanage, and she gives him the name Reg, and they watch the sun rise over the abyss together. Riko gets ready for another trip into the abyss, thinking about her mom before falling asleep. She later watches Hammerbeaks fight off a predator through a telescope, and learns from her friend Laffy that Laffy's husband, Hablog, is getting close to the abyss's second layer. Back at home, the kids study Reg's strange abilities, and figure out he's probably made up of powerful, rare items from the abyss, maybe even a legendary find. Worried he'll be taken away and taken apart if anyone finds out, they help him pretend to be an orphan with memory loss named Reg. Fortunately, Reg gets accepted into the orphanage and starts training to become a delver like the others. A few months later, Hablog's team comes back from the abyss, but only Liza's whistle returns, not Liza herself. It's revealed that Liza was Riko's mother. During a festival held in Liza's honor, Riko learns from Leader that her eye problems come from the curse of the abyss, and that she was actually born deep inside the abyss during a very dangerous mission. Riko is then allowed to read her mother's sealed letter, which describes a creature that looks like Reg and includes a message saying, "I'll be waiting at the bottom of the abyss." During his first dive, Reg gets scared by a praying skeleton, but instead of putting him off, it makes him even more determined to find out who he really is. Nat thinks the plan is way too dangerous, but Riko's already shown her mother's letter to the group and decided that she's going to search for Liza in the abyss. Nat warns her it's too risky, and even points out that Liza has probably been dead for years. But Reg, who doesn't seem to be affected by the curse like normal people, starts to believe that he might be connected to the mysteries mentioned in the letter, and decides to go with Riko, both to protect her and to learn more about himself. Even though Shiggy warns them of how dangerous the abyss really is, the two get ready to leave anyways, so Nat eventually agrees to help guide them to a secret entry point at the wharf, even though he still doesn't agree with their decision to go. Before leaving, Reg notices a hidden letter from Leader in their supplies, but doesn't say anything about it, and he and Riko start their descent into the abyss while Nat and Shiggy watch them go. Riko wakes up and finds Reg passed out after he set up a big tripwire trap around them while she was sleeping. They're now 820 meters deep, way past Riko's old goal of just reaching 400 meters. After eating breakfast, Riko's star compass falls into a waterfall and gets lost, but she says she believes that anything taken from the abyss eventually returns to it. Reg then finally gives her a letter from Jiruo, which includes fresh copies of Liza's notes and a warning that Jiruo is already chasing after them. They hurry onward, barely escaping an attack from a creature called a Silk Fang, before Hablog catches up to them. Hablog explains that he's not there to stop them or to bring them back. He was actually asked by Shiggy and Nat to help guide them safely toward the Seeker camp. Riko turns down his help because she wants to prove herself fairly and pass Jiruo's test. Instead, Hablog gives them useful supplies and warns them to be careful around Ozen, the powerful delver who once helped save Riko when she was a baby and now runs the Seeker camp. After saying goodbye to Hablog, Riko and Reg cross into the second layer and come across a creature called a corpse weeper, which tricks victims by copying the sounds of someone crying for help. After realizing a nearby delver is already dead, a second corpse weeper suddenly grabs Riko and flies off with her, and Reg rushes to save her. Reg tries to reach Riko as the corpse sweeper carries her toward their nest, blocking his attacks along the way. When several of them attack him at once, he briefly blacks out, and then suddenly fires a powerful beam that destroys the one holding her. He catches her safely, but then is worried about the fact that he could have hurt her instead. Riko wakes up fine, although still weak from the curse, and excitedly decides to name Reg's new power Incinerator. She tells him that she'll help him to get better at using it. Later, Reg has a bad dream about losing her, and then wakes up, realizing that he passed out from using too much energy. Riko is more upset that she lost her Delver notebook during the attack, but says that she'll make a new one. Riko cooks a meal using parts from the creatures that they defeated, but Reg feels uneasy eating something that once ate people, so Riko explains that Delver's strength gets passed down this way, which makes him feel better. They reach the inverted forest, where Reg gives Riko his cloak to stay warm. As they approach Seeker Camp, they're suddenly greeted by Ozen, who seems surprised that Riko is still alive. Reg and Riko take the gondola up to Seeker Camp, where Ozen meets them. Riko, still feeling sick from the climb, throws up when they arrive. Ozen admits that she's the one who helped save baby Riko, though she also says she had thought about leaving Riko behind to grab a valuable item instead. Riko explains that she came because of her mother's letter, and Ozen lets them stay for a bit, having her helper, Marolk, watch over them, and give them temporary whistles. Marolk shows them around and gets along with Reg, explaining that Ozen took him in because his eyes are too sensitive for sunlight. That night, Riko wakes up scared after seeing what looks like a headless body moving, so she hides in Reg's bed. The next day, Ozen tells them that Liza is dead, since she found her whistle and a letter at the grave, and says Liza never wrote any messages to Riko. She then shows them a strange box that doesn't actually stop death. It just brings dead things back to life for a little while, and proves this by telling them about Riko's birth, but Reg hurriedly tells Ozen to stop hurting Riko. A blog tells Shiggy and Nat about Ozen's reputation, secretly worried about how Riko's meeting with her will go. At camp, Ozen tells Reg that treasures like him aren't supposed to exist officially, since discovering the bottom of the abyss would ruin people's fear-driven belief in it. She attacks him to test how strong he really is, and even though they fight hard, both Reg and Riko end up badly hurt, and Riko gets knocked out. When Riko wakes up, Ozen warns her that, like anything the curse warning box brings back, she'll eventually die again. Riko says survival was never her goal. Only staying with Reg matters to her. It turns out Marolk secretly went to go and get help, revealing the whole fight was actually a test. Ozen then confirms that Liza's grave was empty, meaning that she's still alive and somewhere deep below. In a flashback, a young Liza discovers scars on Ozen's head and asks to become her student, eventually growing into a skilled delver herself. Back in the present, Ozen gives Riko and Reg 3 weeks to get ready before new delvers show up, starting with 10 days of survival training alone in the forest. By day 3, Zappo, a member of Ozen's squad, says Riko has good instincts but isn't physically strong enough yet, while Reg is physically tough but hesitant and slow to react. Still, they're both getting better and starting to help each other out. After 10 days, they head back to the camp, while Marolk admits he cried on his first day of training. Ozen explains that time works differently down in the abyss, so even though many years have passed, Liza could still be alive. She warns them to stay away from dangerous white whistles further down, especially someone named Bondrewd. She gives Riko one of Liza's old items and tells her something secret before sending them off toward the 3rd layer. In a flashback, Liza admits that she hid the truth about who Riko's parents are in order to protect her, believing Riko should be free to choose her own life, even if it means being apart from her. She asks Ozen to eventually tell Riko the truth, and Ozen reluctantly agrees. Riko and Reg make their way down to the Great Fault, dodging a Marakajak while using Naratantan nests as distractions. They run into the same Crimson Splitjaw from before, and since using Incinerator would knock Reg out and leave Riko unprotected, he avoids it while they get trapped in a cave, and he's forced to use it to kill a Marakajak. While Reg is passed out, Riko gets hungry and falls into a plant-like creature's trap, but she manages to cut herself free and barely escapes a group of creatures drawn to a fruity smell on her skin. Once she reaches open ground, the curse hits her. She hallucinates being reunited with her mom and friends back in Orth. She becomes upset when she realizes that Reg isn't there, and warily insists that she needs him right before waking up. The Crimson Splitjaw appears once again, but Reg wakes up just in time to hit it with the Blaze Reap, causing an explosion that knocks it into the depths below, after which Riko and Reg continue on, finally getting their first look at the 4th layer. Rico and Reg head into the 4th layer and see that it's full of plants holding hot water. They soon run into an orb piercer, a creature that can predict their movements and stab through almost anything. Their gear gets destroyed during the fight, and Rico unexpectedly gets poisoned by one of its spikes. With no way to fight it safely, they try to escape upward instead, which triggers the curse from both the 3rd and 4th layers, causing Rico to start bleeding and hallucinating. As the poison spreads, Rico tells Reg that he needs to break her arm and cut off her hand to save her life. Stunned, Reg reluctantly agrees since he trusts her. Rico suddenly stops breathing, and Reg fails to cut her arm. He frantically tries to bring her back. A stranger suddenly tells him that Rico's heart is still beating, though barely. They help Reg revive Rico and offer them shelter before introducing themselves as Nanachi, a Narehate, which means someone who's been changed by the Abyss's curse. Nanachi fixes up Rico's broken arm, wondering why Reg broke the bone instead of just cutting at the elbow, though he says that he was only doing what Rico told him to. Reg introduces himself, not realizing Nanachi already knew who they were. Nanachi explains that they survived climbing up from the 6th layer, but lost their humanity because of it. Unlike their companion, Midi, who lost herself completely. Wanting to stay hidden from the other Delvers, Nanachi sends Reg out to gather supplies for healing. Back at the hideout, Nanachi treats Rico using medicine made from Midi's blood, which can resist poison, and cooks a stew that tastes terrible, so Reg decides he'll cook for Rico himself from now on. As he's walking, he finds some gravestones, and suddenly sees the Blaze Reap near them. He wonders why it's here, since he was sure that it was kicked away by the orb piercer. He starts wondering where he is before Nanachi approaches him and asks what's wrong. Reg hurriedly points to the Blaze Reap, but realizes it's disappeared. So Nanachi asks if he's actually become a piece of junk now. As Reg is slowly heading back, he wonders what this all means. Back in Orth, Kiwi gets a fever on his birthday, and Nat starts worrying that it might be the legendary birthday death disease. Mio takes him to a medical ship in the caravan fleet, but his fever suddenly disappears, so she wonders if it might be linked to the curse. At Nanachi's hideout, Reg has a strange flashback, after which Nanachi shows him how the curse actually works. She explains that it silently surrounds Delvers, which only harms them when they try to go back up, with more serious injuries causing worse effects. She adds that the Abyss's protective barrier gets weaker around living beings, which is how predators sense people. Reg helps save an old Delver from an orb piercer by attacking its sensitive organ, forcing it to retreat. Even though Nanachi worries about being found out, Reg asks the rescued Delver to pass along a message to Jidao. Impressed by Nanachi's skills, Reg asks them to come along deeper into the Abyss, so Nanachi agrees to think about it, but only if Reg does something for them first. They seem hesitant, but Reg tells them not to hold back, so they unexpectedly ask him to kill Midi for them. In a flashback, it's revealed that Nanachi and Midi were once regular kids, taken in by White Whistle Bondrewd, who used them in cruel experiments involving the deadly curse of the 6th layer. Nanachi turns into a blessed Narehate, while Midi lost her humanity completely, left trapped in an immortal, suffering body. After years of failed attempts to end her pain, Nanachi finally asks Reg to use his incinerator to release her. Reg hesitates at first, wondering about what might happen to Nanachi afterward, but agrees once Nanachi promises not to take their own life once Midi is gone. Nanachi says goodbye to Midi and tells her that it won't be long before they meet again. Reg tearfully readies his incinerator, but just as he's about to fire it, Nanachi hugs Midi and apologizes to her, promising that they'll always be together. They slowly tell Reg to do it, so he forces himself to fire his incinerator and starts crying with Nanachi. Later, Riko tells them that she felt Midi's presence while she was unconscious, and was comforted by her spirit before it faded away. And Nanachi decides to leave their old life behind and join Riko and Reg on their journey deeper into the Abyss. The group leaves Nanachi's hideout and reaches the Garden of the Flowers of Fortitude, which Reg remembers is the same place he saw back then. He and Nanachi suddenly hear something, and Reg sees that they're Delvers. He asks if he should go and check them out, so Nanachi tells him not to get caught and reminds him that whatever they say is absolute. Nanachi notices that the runners' consciousnesses are all messed up and wonders if they're confused about something. Nanachi suddenly tells Reg to stop and annoyingly questions why they are here, revealing that the Delver is one of the Umbra Hands, the delving crew of Bondrewd, the Sovereign of Dawn. Reg remembers remembers Bondrewd being Midi and Nanachi's bitter enemy, and keeps his guard up, but the Umber Hand suddenly disappears and reappears behind him. The Umber Hand tells him to keep quiet since he'll wake them. He confirms that he did indeed cause the noise, but explains that this place has been deemed off-limits for over 60 surface time days now. He returns the Blaze Reap to Reg, and again warns him that this area is off-limits, but Reg says that they'll decide what they're going to do only after they see what he's doing. The Umber Hand tells Reg to come with him, while Riko notices an insect among the flowers and quickly takes out her notes. The notes explain that the insects hide among the flowers of fortitude to lay their larvae inside organisms that come near them. The Umber Hand shows Reg an infested human and reveals that an astounding number of native creatures are being eaten alive as well. He reveals that these creatures are called amaranthine deceptors and have already made a nest in the hill. He suddenly gets a signal and takes out a pipe, explaining that burning agents have already been dispersed in key positions in the area, and starts incinerating the field. Reg hurriedly says that there are still delvers here, but the Umber Hand reveals that the adult insects are entering their active stage, so there's no saving them either way. Reg's about to say something, but Nanachi stops him and reminds him that they can't protect Riko alone here. Reg tells himself not to lose sight of what matters as he hurries back to his friends. They decide to get out of here quickly since the fire is consuming all the air. The group reaches the 5th layer called the Sea of Corpses, and as they rest, Nanachi explains that they came from the lowest part of the 5th layer called the Ido Front, the final point from which one can return human. It's Bondrewd's miniature garden and contains the only entrance to the 6th layer, but Nanachi doesn't think Bondrewd will just let them through, so they'll have to face him. Their path is opened thanks to a landslide, so they continue going deeper. Reg asks if there are any other living beings around here, and Riko remembers a creature called the Hamashirama. Reg dives into the water to catch one, but he and Nanachi are disgusted by how it looks. They ask Riko if it's really safe to eat, so she confirms that it's not poisonous. Reg is initially hesitant, but he and Nanachi are surprised by how delicious it is, and Riko agrees to teach them how to make a stew from it. Nanachi talks about how they're not even sure if they'll meet Midi again, but Riko cheers them up, and they continue their journey to the Ido Front, where a girl named Prushka approaches them and asks if they're her father's guests. A bit after that, Bondrewd himself greets them, and reveals that entering the 6th layer requires a personalized white whistle, which disappoints the group. He offers to let them stay the night, and Prushka gives them a tour. During the night, Riko goes looking for a bathroom and gets hit by the curse of the abyss while climbing some stairs. She wakes up being looked after by Prushka, who introduces her to her pet, Mania. Meanwhile, Nanachi confronts Bondrewd to ask about Prushka. Bondrewd asks Nanachi to work for him again, and Nanachi agrees, but only if he lets Riko and Reg go safely into the 6th layer. Bondrewd refuses, wanting to study Reg more because he's so unusual. Realizing the danger, Nanachi rushes to save Reg, only to find the Umber Hands have already started experimenting on him and cut off one of his arms. Prushka and Riko are shocked to see Reg's state, and Prushka hurriedly orders the Umber Hands to stop mistreating her father's guests, but they tell her this area is off-limits to her. The group, along with Prushka, escapes Ido Front by boat, but Prushka stays behind, hoping to convince Bondrewd to give Reg his arm back. While injured, Reg notices the smell of burnt Netherwood stew nearby, and Riko figures out that they're near a stingerhead nest, thanks to Liza's notes, so they set up an ambush for Bondrewd. When Bondrewd and his Umber Hands show up again, they walk right into the trap and are wiped out by a colony of stingerheads. Only Bondrewd survives, thanks to his weapon, Sparagmos, but the group keeps on attacking him, destroying his gauntlets and infecting him with the Deceptor larvae, which exposes him to the curse of the 6th layer before he's finally crushed under a boulder. Prushka then appears with an Umber Hand and starts crying when she sees Bondrewd, but the Umber Hand suddenly swaps his mask for Bondrewd's, taking over his identity, revealing that all the Umber Hands are actually versions of Bondrewd himself. He calmly knocks out Prushka, again inviting them back to Ido Front whenever they're ready. Later, Riko guesses that Bondrewd might be using something called a zoaholic relic to move his consciousness between bodies. Sneaking back into Ido Front, Nanachi and Riko enter what Nanachi calls the processing room, where Nanachi explains that Bondrewd's cartridges, the tools he uses to survive the curse, are made made from living people, stripped down to only what's needed to keep them alive. Nanachi feels guilty because of having helped create this, but Bondrewd suddenly appears and explains that Ido Front exists to produce what's needed to make a white whistle, before asking Nanachi to rejoin him again. Reg suddenly bursts in, having absorbed the base's energy, and starts fighting Bondrewd. Reg fires his incinerator, but Nanachi steps in, helping him calm down and spare the group while damaging the facility. An Umbra hand then drags Reg down into the pit below, after which the three of them come up with a final plan. And as Reg climbs back up, he forces Bondrewd to use up his cartridges during the fight. Back in the 5th layer, Bondrewd reveals that one of the cartridges he used contains Prushka's remains, shocking them as he shows off his newly gained blessed form. In a flashback, it's revealed that after surviving a transport accident, Prushka suffered serious trauma from the curse of the 5th layer. A black whistle named Guerra tried and failed to save her, and even considered ending her suffering, until Bondrewd stepped in, hugged her, and claimed that she was his daughter, and named her Prushka. Alone, Prushka slowly started to heal after Bondrewd gave her a small creature that she named Mania, which she called her new birthday. Over time, she improved and acted like a normal kid, until one day she climbed the stairs at Ido Front and was struck by the curse again. Even though she was badly hurt, her mind recovered faster this time, but her hair stayed permanently curled afterwards. Presently, Reg fires his incinerator, but Bondrewd dodges it, and just as he's about to win, Riko strikes him down using the incinerator built into Reg's severed arm. Later, Riko holds Prushka's cartridge and starts crying. As its life fades, a stone falls out, shocking everyone. Nanachi explains that Prushka turned into the stone so she could keep adventuring with Riko, eventually becoming her own white whistle. Nanachi, Riko, and Reg then get ready to begin their last dive, and Bondrewd watches them leave, along with a group of Umbra hands. Voiko is a young girl who was hurt by her foster father, Juroimo, and is now traveling with a group of people called Ganja, led by Wazukyan and Belaf, searching for a legendary golden city at the bottom of the abyss. Juroimo used to tell a disturbing story about finding a star compass from a ship whose crew died in mysterious ways, and he then used that story to mock Voiko, who worryingly wonders if she actually deserves to be one of the Ganja's 3 sages. But Belaf reassures her that she's more capable than she thinks. After a storm wrecks most of their ships, the survivors reach a tribal village and trade the star compass for help getting into the abyss. A young girl from the tribe, who was cast out because she couldn't have children, joins them and warns them about the curse of the abyss. Meanwhile, Riko, Reg, and Nanachi continue descending through the abyss until they finally reach the 6th layer. The altar of the absolute boundary lands in the 6th layer, and the group finds the remains of an old city. Liza's notes don't help much with directions, since they mostly cover animals rather than where to go. So Nanachi uses their food to sense the force field. After barely escaping a dangerous eruption while gathering food, Riko makes a meal that reminds her of home and starts talking about her friends. She and Nanachi write letters and send them off, but a large creature grabs their mail balloon before it can get very far. Later, they wake up to find that Prushka's stone has been stolen and see strange markings left on their things. Even though Nanachi and Reg are usually very alert to things like that, they also find some creepy figures made using their own hair and track the culprit to a huge tree marked with the same symbol. Feeling like something is watching them, they carefully go inside and discover a hidden village full of strange creatures. There, a creature named Majikaja greets them, recognizing them as Delvers, and tells them someone is currently studying Prushka's stone. So the group follows Majikaja further into the village to get Prushka back. As they're walking, Majikaja explains that the curse wouldn't exist without the force field, but it also makes it harder to predict where danger might come from. And they find the jeweler shaping Prushka's stone into an instrument, and Riko can tell Prushka is okay with it. While exploring the market, Riko learns that everything works based on something called value, where objects and even body parts can be bought or sold. When a Narehate handles Mania roughly and hurts it, they realize that the community has harsh punishments for damaging someone else's value. The Narehate explain that they used to be Delvers who lost their way, and now live in here permanently in exchange for becoming whatever form they wanted most. Riko feels for them, since they all shared the same dream of exploring the abyss. After checking into an inn, Riko gets sick from bad food, so Nanachi and Reg go looking for medicine. They suddenly hear some noise and realize that Faputa, a legendary and immortal Narehate, has arrived. So Reg goes out to find her and runs into a strange ghost-like figure standing on top of a giant robot. Meanwhile, in another part of the 6th slayer, Ganja runs into a group that seems trustworthy at first, but one of them suddenly gets grabbed and taken, forcing them to retreat. Fapata appears behind Reg in a ghost-like form, revealing that she has 4 arms and knows his name, hearing which Reg suddenly remembers some weird memories. Worried about being watched, she pulls him away on her creature Gabaroon so that they can talk in private. She checks whether he's really her Reg by examining his wounds, and after confirming it from his blood, she insists that he belongs with her instead of mortals like Riko and Nanachi, since they will eventually die. However, Reg declines and chooses to stay with his friends, even though he's unsure about what he used to mean to her. As he leaves, flower petals unexpectedly fall around him, along with name tags connected to funerals held back in Orth. Meanwhile, Riko looks for her missing friends and almost gets overwhelmed by some Narehate before being saved. She later finds out that some villagers can actually understand human language, including one who turns out to be Wazukyan, one of the 3 sages that helped build the village. Meanwhile, Nanachi and Majikaja go into Belaf's home, and Nanachi is shocked to find Midi there, and the woman remarks that once one has finally found their treasure, what they value will shift, and their journey will end. Reg tries to make his way back to the village, but gets attacked by the turbaned dragon along the way, but Gabaroon saves him and warns him not to stay in the village for long. As they head back, Reg keeps asking Gabaroon questions about who he really is, so Gabaroon explains that it's an interference unit, basically a thinking robot built to observe and gather information, but says that it doesn't have any data on Reg's type. Still, because of how similar their designs are, Gabaroon wonders if they might have been made by the same creator, though it points out that units like them normally don't travel between layers. Gabaroon doesn't really know who made either of them, and asks Reg to try and find out, since he is able to move around more freely. Meanwhile, Riko finds out that the Narehate standing next to her is actually Wazukyan, one of the 3 sages, and embarrassingly introduces herself properly after realizing this. Later, she is led to a hidden cave where she frees a trapped woman named Vueko, who used to be against the village, but has since changed her mind about it. Vueko then helps Riko look for her friends, bringing her into Belaf's house, where she finds Nanachi lying next to a clone that looks like Midi. Belaf explains that making the clone cost him half his own body, and that Nanachi gave himself up in exchange for it, meaning Riko would need to give up something of equal value to get them back. Riko almost gives up half of her organs to free Nanachi, but Majikaja stops her right before a dangerous creature attacks the village. Rushing to save Prushka's whistle from the destroyed jewelry shop, Riko works with the villagers to trap and kill the creature, called a Fuzo Shepu, and even though the plan mostly works, the creature makes one last desperate attack, putting nearby Narehate in danger. Prushka tells Riko to use her power, which brings Reg back just in time to save everyone, after which Reg and Riko move in for the final blow, but see that this creature is already empty, since its queen has already died and caused the rest of the hive to scatter. Riko then asks how she can free Nanachi from Belaf, and Wazukyan suggests using part of Fapata. While Reg goes and talks to Fapata, Riko rests with Vueko and the other villagers, and Vueko reveals that she was actually part of the original group that founded the village, having once been a sage herself. Ganja pulls back after one of the interference units gets grabbed, at first thinking that they had been led into a trap, but the units revealed that they had picked up on human language just by watching them. They try to go back to the surface, but their plans fail when they realize just how dangerous that the curse really is, after which Wazukyan convinces everyone to accept that they are staying in the abyss for good. They struggle to find safe drinking water, and eventually settle on a source that turns out to actually be the remains of a strange creature. Then they find a powerful item called the Cradle of Desire, which can grant wishes, but only to someone with a simple, childlike mind. Vueko has Irumyui use it to try and cure everyone's sickness, and although it heals her, Irumyui starts changing more and more, and eventually gives birth to strange, non-human babies that don't survive, causing her a lot of pain each time. And Vueko, who has grown to see Irumyui almost like a daughter, eventually gets sick too. Just when things start to look hopeless, Wazukyan gives Vueko a strange broth to eat, and she wakes up completely healed. She slowly approaches Wazukyan, who assures her that he gave some to everyone else as well, and reveals that Irumyui saved them all. Fapata promised to give Reg part of herself and tears off her ear and arm. It's later revealed that the broth that healed the sick Ganja members was actually made from Irumyui's dying children, shocking Belaf, who becomes overwhelmed with guilt. Vueko watches as Irumyui keeps on transforming into a massive, tree-like creature, while her children are repeatedly killed for food. Wazukyan reveals that he tried to get a second wish-granting item when Irumyui began began growing weaker along with Vueko. A while later, Irumyui starts absorbing Ganja members who offer themselves to her, turning them into Narehate, believing that this will earn them forgiveness. Vueko refuses to take a part in this, and tries to end her own life, but Wazukyan stops her and reveals that he's become a Narehate too, explaining that he did it to give others something to believe in. Trapped inside of what used to be Irumyui's mind, Vueko sensed Irumyui's true final wish, the birth of Fapata, meant to get revenge for her lost children. Vueko spends years caring for and naming Irumyui's stillborn children, until Riko eventually finds her, ending her story by explaining that Fapata now wants to free Irumyui, even if that meant destroying the village. Reg and Fapata head back into the village, carrying the body parts that she gave him, which sets off a chaotic reaction stronger than before. Vueko stops him from showing the parts to Belaf, worrying that it could break him mentally. Reg explains that Fapata gave him the parts to keep a promise, hinting that he used to be called the Prince, someone meant to help and get her past the village's protective barrier using his incinerator. Wazukyan admits that he still is secretly wanting to continue the journey, hearing which Riko realizes that he's hoping that she'll use the wish-granting item to give the village a chance to explore the abyss again, though he insists that it has to be her decision. Suddenly, Jiroimo attacks them and is revealed to be a creature formed from Vueko's traumatic memories, shaped into being by Irumyui. As they're fighting it, Reg has to use the incinerator, which damages the village's barrier. Worried about what will happen once Fapata arrives, Reg asks the others to protect Riko before passing out. Fapata appears, declaring that she won't forgive the villagers and plans to get revenge. She starts fighting Jiroimo, and the shaking of it wakes Nanachi up. They tell Midi that they had a dream and ask Belaf what's happening, so he tells them the dream will start turning into a reality now. Belaf passes on his memories, and with them his sense of value, to Nanachi before leaving, freeing them to go wherever they want. He warns that Midi will disappear if she's taken outside the village barrier, instead of keeping her trapped in an illusion. Nanachi chooses to let her go, tearfully saying goodbye as Midi fades away at the barrier's edge. Meanwhile, Reg wakes up and confronts Fapata, who is violently attacking the villagers. He says that he'll stop her and save Nanachi, so Fapata declares that she'll make him remember what he's meant to do. Reg tries to talk her down, but she insists her mother, Irumyui, has to be destroyed to finally end her suffering. But as rain pours down and damages the village, Wazukyan uses his own body to shield it. Overwhelmed by the memories of Fapata's kindness and pain, Reg begs her to stop hurting herself through this path of destruction. So Fapata admits that he's kind, but foolish, and slams him into the ground. With Reg knocked out, Fapata blames Riko for making Reg forget about her. When she tries to attack Riko, Gabiroon steps in and gets badly hurt protecting her, saying it's the only way to keep Fapata's future with Reg intact. Belaf and Nanachi arrive, and Belaf lets Fapata kill him while giving her his memories, along with a message telling her to keep on moving forward and figure out her own values. As the village's protective barrier breaks down, dangerous creatures get inside and start attacking the villagers, throwing off Fapata's plans for revenge. She tries to fight them off but gets overwhelmed, so her siblings try and save her, but they also get killed by a turbinate dragon, and Gabiroon sacrifices itself to protect her, thanking her for the time that they had spent together before he gets destroyed. After nearly dying, Fapata is brought back again, as the villagers offer themselves to her. Seeing the creatures attack innocent people instead of her makes her even more conflicted about her mission, and so she finally decides to fight back against the invaders and learn her value herself. Fapata fights off the invading creatures alongside Jiroimo while in a flashback. It's revealed that Gabiroon gave her a name and taught her about value. Meanwhile, Riko and the others meet up with a dying Wazukyan, who explains that becoming something more than human comes from a buildup of experiences, not from any singular transformation, and asks them to look after Fapata before he passes away. As the fight continues, Vueko gets hit by the curse while trying to help, and Nanachi rescues her. Reg helps Fapata defeat the invaders and take down the village's bridge to stop them from crossing, and as everything is collapsing, Fapata nearly dies, but gets saved by Reg, while Majikaja takes the others to safety. Once they're safe, Fapata connects with Vueko telepathically, and initially thinks that she's Irumyui before Vueko dies peacefully in her arms. Fapata tearfully buries her next to a marker for Irumyui, and remembers what Gabiroon said. Reg asks Fapata if she would consider coming with them. She asks if he really wants her to come with him, when he forgot their past and their promise. She claims that they're just strangers, but Reg hurriedly denies that and says that he wants to go on an adventure with her. However, Fapata reveals that she'll explore alone to observe, touch, and gather, but she'll still think about his proposal, and they smilingly bid farewell to her.